So Ryan, it's Monaco up next and a totally different type of track to what you used to racing on. How excited are you about taking to the streets of the Principality?
Really excited to be there, and I think for any driver to be racing in Monaco is a one-off experience, and really looking forward to it, driving around the streets with the technicality of the circuit and the bumps and just the history of the whole track that hasn't really changed in many years. And yeah, it's one of the most challenging circuits you get, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Monaco's so special to any racing driver. Just give us a bit of an insight into the sort of things that you need to be able to be on top of your game of to be able to compete around there.
You need, first time for anyone there is very difficult, as there's no testing and there's no real track time there. So for me being there the second time, I have a lot of experience there already, and with the bumps and everything happening in Monaco, with the weather and how close everything is, you have to concentrate really hard compared to most tracks, especially because it's very close racing in Porsche Super Cup. It's any few tenths will put you 5-6 places back, so you have to really use everything you have at that track.
Okay. And with Jenson Button making a return to F1, you won't be the only Somerset driver on the streets.
No, I mean, yeah, there's a handful of drivers in Formula 1 and there's a handful of drivers in Porsche Super Cup, and to have two Brits and two guys from Somerset, all of that on the grid, racing on the same weekend, it's quite good. And I think Somerset should really look at that and say we have two international drivers on the grid, one in Formula 1 and one in Porsche Super Cup, which is the race just before. So I feel like I'm representing Somerset, and I don't know how he feels about that, but I think he would probably think the same as well.
You must be going into the race with a great deal of confidence. Just talk us through your latest series win in the Porsche GT3 Middle East Cup Series.
Yeah, that was a really good experience for me. I felt like I did really well. I had 11 out of 12 podiums, 8 wins out of 12, and I felt like I really improved as a driver over the winter, and I really upped my game to really compete at any series internationally at the front, considering that there's guys now who I raced in that championship now doing Super Cup, and they're very, very good drivers, top 10 drivers, and I've showed that I can beat them. So my expectations is quite high at the moment, and it's quite good that you can win a championship and then enter a new championship.
And although you've joined a new team, it's one that's steeped in Porsche racing pedigree. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that team?
Yeah, so Lechner Racing is one of the most experienced teams, if not the most experienced team in Porsche Super Cup and Porsche Racing. 45 years almost of experience, and they have drivers vasting from years and years of talent, and they've all gone on to great things. They've all won Le Mans, they've all become works drivers for different manufacturers, and I have Michael Ammermuller as my teammate this year. He's very experienced, he's in his 6th year, many times race winner. I have the British champion in my team, I have a young guy from Oman, so we have an international squad, and it's quite good that we have a Porsche Junior in our team also as well. And you know, they're regarded as the best team, and the best drivers usually go to this team.
And one of the attractions of the series is that you drive the latest Porsche car. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, to keep it brief, it's a different engine from a 3.8 to a 4 litre. Everything else generally feels the same, but it's all slightly new technology, but they haven't changed too much, because the concept of cup racing is that you have no ABS, no traction control, and they've tried to keep that basis the same but just make it slightly faster to make it a bit more difficult for the driver.
And coming back closer to home, although you spend a lot of time away racing, Somerset is still very much where you're grounded, isn't it?
Yeah, I like to spend my time off around Somerset, as I've built an atmosphere around here that I can relax. I went to school here, I train here, I have friends here, and I think having sponsors from around here as well makes it extra important to stay local, and that local businesses can see that there's a local driver racing. And if I decided to move to a different country or move somewhere else, then I'm not sure I would get the support from businesses around here to help me. And I generally wouldn't feel comfortable living anywhere else except for Somerset, because everything is here for me.
Yeah, you came quite late to motorsport, didn't you? But have been on a steep learning curve ever since. What was your first racing experience, and how did you progress through the sport?
My first racing experience was a kart race I did in 2002, and I did 1 year of cadets, and I did pretty well for my first year, and I then moved up to the next class and got a second place in my first race for that in the wet, and I was only 13 racing against guys who were 16, and it was apparent, not really to me at that time, but people were saying how well I did, and I took a break after that for 10 years, and I remember some names I used to race against, and they're all racing now, and I felt like it was a big step for me to come back into racing in 2012, and I did all right in my first season, and then I moved very quickly through the ranks, and then I eventually made the switch to Porsches.
Right. And just a few quick fire questions at the end. Your favourite racing driver?
James Hunt.
Favourite circuit?
Spa and Bahrain.
Biggest influence on your racing career?
My dad and my whole family, but more my dad.
If you weren't a racing driver, what would you be doing now?
Probably boxing, as that was the sport I was doing while I wasn't racing, and probably working for the family business.
Okay.
Yeah.